Hey guys, it's Shayda. In this week's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to successfully design a beautiful floral motif. And then we're going to paint some watercolor roses. So let's get started. So to begin, I've got everything laid out on my desk. I've got my workspace set up, and I want to take you through this floral motif from start to finish. So we're going to talk about how to design one of these pieces because the design portion can be tricky, and then we'll talk about painting. So I've got some watercolor paper here. It's 140 pound cold pressed paper, and you can see I've also got my paints. I'm using discs, and then I've got a few different sizes of watercolor paint brushes, and of course I have some clean water handy, and then I'm using just scrap paper and pencils to come up with these designs. So here's one of the designs that I did just on some scrap graph paper. This is another one. This one's more like a bouquet. And the key with these designs is that you want the flowers and the leaves to look natural. So there's nothing worse than painting a bunch of pretty flowers, but they don't sit together properly. The design isn't thought out. So what I do is I start by making a map, and here you can see I'm just putting some circles where I want the flowers to be, and I'll do sort of 3 large flowers. I like to work in odd numbers. So I've placed these circles where I'll have the 3 main flowers, and then from there I'll start adding in a few leaves or a few berries. I'll place some smaller flowers, and I may decide to erase part of this or change it up, but doing the map really allows me to play around and say, okay, what looks natural? So I'll place smaller circles where I want smaller flowers to be, and then once I'm moderately happy with the beginning of the design, I'll go over it in pen and I'll start asking myself, okay, what kind of flowers are these going to be? So the larger flowers in this piece are going to be roses. And it's also a good idea at this time to go on Google Images or get a book out of the library and look at flowers and leaves and get to know some different species. So the leaves that I'm adding right now, I actually modeled off of Dusty Miller, which is a popular one in bridal bouquets right now. So anytime you're illustrating from life, I think that's going to be really helpful. And I just go around and say, okay, I need another leaf here or another little bit of berries there. And that's how I start and finish my design. And then once I'm happy with it, I just take my rough copy paper, tape it to the watercolor paper, try to center it. And then I take a piece of this graphite transfer paper and I place it dark side down in between, sort of sandwich it in, and then I go over the entire design with a very sharp pencil in order to transfer my design so that I might start my good copy painting on the watercolor paper. So now the design is transferred very faintly onto the watercolor paper, and at this point I'm going to put paint on top of that design, and I'll finish it with my pen or with ink later. So I start by mixing lots of water into these discs. I want to get them nice and wet. I like to have a palette handy so I can mix up some of my own colors. And here's the first thing I want to show you is how I paint these roses. So I've got lots of nice wet pink paint here, and I just go around and I do these little sort of C shapes or semicircles. You can see I just drag the brush and I sort of overlap these little C shapes all around the circle area where I want this flower to be. And I'll just sort of drag the paint. I let some areas stay darker and some lighter, and you can see I'm just doing a bunch of C shapes like the letter C, and they sort of overlap, but I'm also careful to leave some white space as well, sort of in between these semicircles. And I find that just gives the look of this very underworked, very simple rose. It's a technique I use over and over again, and I really like it, and it's really not very difficult to master. And I'm going to paint some leaves here. This flower is not a rose, it's just sort of a 4-petal flower, so I'm just sort of splashing a little yellow paint there. As I always say, just with watercolors, the best thing you can do is just not overwork them. Just splash a little paint on the page and don't be afraid to just let it dry and see how it looks. Often you'll find, I think it looks really beautiful when you just sort of let a little puddle dry. You never really know exactly what it's going to look like. Here what I'm doing is I'm allowing the flower, the pink paint from the flower to sort of bleed into the leaves ever so slightly. That's up to you how much or how little you want to do that. I think it kind of gives this fun psychedelic almost look, but you do have to be careful with it. Here I'm going to paint another rose. So you see me doing this in a peach color. I'm just doing, again, these semicircles or C shapes, just overlapping slightly, being sure to leave a little negative space in between them. And it comes together really easy and gives this beautiful look. So as you can see, I'm painting this piece in multiple colors, but if you're just starting out, a great idea is to do a piece like the ones you can see off to the side of my desk here, where you're just working with black or blue or whatever color you like. I find that that really allows you to focus on the technique of the watercolors, to focus on light and shadow and depth, and you're not worrying about the colors bleeding, or you're not worrying about choosing colors. So that's a nice idea, and they work out just beautifully. Now here I'm beginning to paint one of the flowers that isn't a rose. So this is one of those 4-petal flowers, and they really don't require as much finesse or technique as the roses, at least not for me. So I'll show you, it's going to be one of these type of flowers, very simple, and a lot of the detail gets added at the end when I go over it in my artist pen. So what I like to do is just mix up a nice amount of paint, get it nice and watery, and just sort of splash it onto the page there. And I like to see what it looks like when it dries. You never really know how it's going to turn out, not exactly anyways. So just leave it, don't overwork it. And now here I'm painting the Dusty Miller type leaves, and I want there to be some depth in this piece. So I'm making them darker towards the bottom of the page, as if the sun were shining on them from above. So I'll leave more paint sitting towards the bottom of the leaf, and that will create that darkness, and I'll sort of lighten it up and leave more water towards the top. And now I'm just speeding this up, and you guys can sort of watch my process as I add a few more small flowers and leaves and berries. And this piece is coming together really quickly, and it's almost done. Once I'm done painting, I just let that dry. So walk away, let it dry, let it really get bone dry before you take a pen to it. Otherwise, the pen will bleed. So once it's been, an hour or whatever, and you really know it's dry, it's a good idea to go in and grab your rough copy so that you can see all the details that you had initially drawn out. And then get an artist pen, like I'm using my Pigma Micron, and I'm using the size 5 or the number 05. And I like to just go in and start adding all the detail, all the lines, and I do sort of a very sketchy type of look where I'll go over things once or twice and add sort of these sketchy lines that don't quite line up with the shape of the leaves and flowers. So here you can see I'm drawing this leaf, and it's going to be a little larger than the purple leaf that's on the page, and I that's just a look that I like. That's sort of my style. And here I'm doing the flower, and I'll add all the details of the petals and the stamen and maybe some lines for shading and detail. And really how you want to add these details is up to you. Now here's how I add the detail to the rose. So I always start right in the center by doing sort of a little bud shape, and I just do a little circle, and then I'll do 3 petals coming out from there. And then you can see I do another few petals coming out from those ones. So I'm creating this sort of almost spiraled effect where you're just drawing petals that sort of grow out from the smaller petals in the center, and you just want to get a little larger as you work your way towards the outside of the flower. And again with this one, I sort of double up my lines to give the flower that very sketchy quality that I like so much. Now I'm going to add the detail to this yellow flower. I draw those 4 petals, and I add this scribbly black dots in the middle to represent the stamen in the middle of the flower. And if you would like more info on drawing flowers and leaves and berries, then I will link my video on that in the description. So if you're wondering, well, slow down, how do you draw all these flowers? I do have a video on that, and you can go check it out. And I hope that'll help a lot if you're wondering about how to draw all these different flowers and leaves. And I think another key too is don't worry about getting it perfect. If you have something that's colorful and round, it's going to look like a flower, and you don't need to have it looking the way it does in the book or in the dictionary. Just have fun with it. And I love the way a piece like this can come together and just look so colorful and beautiful and very much perfectly imperfect. And here I'll finish the piece by adding just a few more leaves and lines that aren't part of my initial design or painting. I love the look of just having maybe 1 or 2 sprigs of leaves or berries that are not painted and are not colored, and it just adds again to that sketchy illustrated quality. All right, well, that's everything for today, guys. I hope you'll find this helpful when you go to design these floral motifs and when you go to paint watercolor flowers. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you next week with a new tutorial.